Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We begin today talking about some insect pressure in Oklahoma and some treatment options to think about this summer. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon and our extension entomologist, Tom Royer.
Seems like it was just a year ago that we were in a sorghum field talking about sugarcane aphids. And Tom, should producers be concerned about them again this year?
Yes, we don't have any evidence that they're not going to show up this year. In fact, they have showed up actually last week in treatable numbers below I-40 in some fields. So the producers need to be out looking at their fields. I'm hopeful this year that we're going to see maybe less of a problem than we did last year, because I know a lot of producers have switched over to some varieties that have shown some tolerance to sugarcane aphid, and so that may actually slow them down a bit. Maybe the natural enemies can keep up with them a little better, because last year they didn't have a chance against them. They just reproduced so quickly. The key for producers is to be out there looking now in a field like this.
What is the threshold for aphids in a field like this?
Well, the thresholds are still fluctuation. I've just decided to choose one this year, and it's 20 to 30% of plants with a established colony. That means that plant's infested, and we're just going with that until our research shows that we have something better, and that maybe we have a better scouting procedure too. We've got a graduate student that's working on that, and we have other people on the what we call the sugarcane aphid team here in Oklahoma that are working on thresholds and evaluating products and looking at hybrids and things. So in a year or two we'll probably be able to lock down more, but right now I'm just going with, I've just picked one of them that's kind of floating around 20 to 30% of plants with an established colony.
Why did the sugarcane aphid really catch producers off guard last year?
Well, for one thing, it just came up through Oklahoma really quickly, and it came up into northern Oklahoma last year and surprised a lot of producers up there because they didn't see it much before. So last year it came in early. They were getting overwhelming numbers. They weren't getting the best control because it was getting ahead of them a little bit, and it hurt some of the production that we saw.
I remember last year whenever we were talking about this, you were talking about different chemical treatments to it, but then you also said there are wasps that will take care of the aphids. Talk about that. Okay,
we are starting to see, it's a tiny parasitic wasp. It's not the same one that we see with green bugs in wheat and sorghum. It instead makes a little black mummy instead of the brown ones. But we actually started seeing some of them a little earlier this year than we did last year in some fields that we were finding infestations. So that's one of the reasons we're kind of hoping that these resistant varieties can kind of meld in with the natural enemies, and maybe they can work more effectively together.
If producers don't have the wasps on their property, what are some of the treatment options?
We basically have two treatments. Savanto insecticide is registered. It was registered at a lower rate this year at 4 to 7 ounces. And Transform, we did receive another Section 18 emergency exemption for Transform at 0.75 to 1.5 ounces per acre. So those are really the only two options. I would even, if you have to make maybe 2 applications, I would maybe suggest switching from one to the other so that we're getting just a slightly different activity. One of the keys that we saw last year was that we had a cool spell that came in late July, early August, and we found out that the sugarcane aphid kind of slows down and quits feeding when it gets cooler, And some of the, especially transform, was not working very well last year because the aphids quit feeding, and it has to be taken up by the aphid for it to work. And by the time they started feeding again, that cool spell went by. The transform was not in enough quantity in there to help control. So that's something to keep in mind. Looks like right now we're not going to have that issue, at least anytime soon.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well thank you much, Tom. And for more information on the sugarcane aphids, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Over the next few weeks, we'll have some quick overviews of some of Oklahoma's more popular summer crops. First up is corn. Here's Josh Lofton.
Corn's a great crop in our state. It holds a lot of diversity. It's grown in quite a few areas of the state. The crop is blessed with less insect and disease pressure than some of our other crops, and it's very sporadic. You know, out in the panhandle you have a different realm of things you have to manage compared to the eastern side of the state. You're going to be a whole lot less stressed on some of the aspects, unlike some of the places up in the Midwest where they have a lot of the various nematode issues. Don't have some of those. We do have some diseases. Rust can come in every once in a while, but we're typically blessed with very low to moderate insect and disease pressure from within a corn crop. The really fun thing that a lot of growers are trying to take advantage of in corn these last couple years are bringing it in as a double crop. It's one that we typically don't think of as a double crop, but in certain parts, now this is not a statewide thing that can be done, but in certain areas of the state, I hear a lot of things up in like Kay County to where they're using a lot of corn as a double crop and being quite successful on it. Really, it's trying to match that double crop season with the critical times that you're going to need moisture, low temperatures. Once again, you typically need those low morning temperatures during pollination, and when finishing out the crop, making sure that you're not overheating or stressing the crop with moisture. With all of our summer crops, the daytime temperature means a lot because that has a lot to do with our evapotranspiration, how much moisture we're going to have into the soil, but it's those nighttime temperatures. You like to see those nighttime temperatures fall down into the 70s. Those are a really good thing for a crop. One, during growth, because we are going to still see some of that growth during the evenings, but once again, during reproductive growth, pollination and making sure that pollen stays viable is critical to getting a successful crop.
We want to talk now about some of the differences between high profit cattle operations and lower profit operations with Damona Doi, our Extension Farm Management Specialist. And Damona, let's just start in general by defining profit.
Okay. So economists think about profits in two components, the revenues and the costs. So the gross revenues are a combination of income from cull cows as well as the calves produced. The costs can consist of both variable costs, so the things like feed, pasture, marketing, vet med, and so on, as well as fixed costs. And the fixed cost components are things like depreciation on machinery and equipment, and interest on the value of the assets and things used in the operation.
And our peers in Kansas have done some research and kind of framed up some things to help us draw some conclusions. Tell us about what they've studied.
Okay. They looked at their data from 2010 to 2014 for operations that had 3 or more years of data in that. And so what they found was that the profit differences between the high and the low producers were not so much influenced by production, while production is important, but more on managing their cost. And so if we look at the cost for those different producers, the high cost producers had higher cost in about every category, and the low cost producers had better revenues So they were earning about $133 more per cow, largely because of slightly heavier calves that they were weaning. But most of the difference in the profits was in the cost categories. And so our take-home message from that is it's really important for producers to understand what their cost of production is long-term if they want to be sustainable as a business.
So in that group that was studied, the outcome of cattle at the end was about the same?
Right. The calf production was about 90.7%, I think, for all of the producers in the database. And so, again, the revenue that they were generating, the differences were, and the profits that they were generating was not as a result of difference in the calf crop, but the strategic decisions that they were making in terms of how they produced that calf crop. And so it was, they were controlling their feed cost, they were managing their machinery and equipment cost. So there's some advantages to size of the operation in that the producers who have 200 cows and a small tractor and hay baler have lower fixed costs per cow than the same operator with 100 cows. And so it's a combination of doing things better across the board, I think, with respect to cost of production. And so a take-home message that we always try to stress is certainly production is important, marketing is important, but managing your costs is really critical.
And of course, this technique and this approach translates beyond just cattle operations too, to the whole farm?
Yes, so some similar research has been done in places like Illinois, and so again, they find some small differences in production perhaps in a given year or marketing in a given year, but the bottom line always comes back to the most profitable producers are the ones who do a good job of managing their costs.
Okay. Obviously, cost management and some of these other techniques we've mentioned will be some of what you and the team are putting together for the upcoming Women in Agriculture Conference. Give us a preview.
Sure. We have 3 keynote speakers that will be coming in. Temple Grandin is one of the featured speakers. Michelle Miller, the Farm Babe, and Kim Bremer, who's a dairy nutritionist but also active in social media and telling ag story, will be highlights. We have 4 tracks: production agriculture, a business and finance track, a alternative enterprise track, and this year new we're adding one that's focused for beginning operators and producers. And so there's an opportunity for everybody to find something.
Damona Doi, thanks a lot. And for information on the things that Damona talked about today, as well as the upcoming Women in Ag Conference, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Most of Oklahoma has had a good spring and summer in terms of moisture and have been able to grow an adequate amount of pasture forage, whether it be Bermuda grass or native grasses. We want to remember though, as we go into the last part of the summer and the day lengths start to shorten, that these grasses will mature and lower in protein content. Also, we want to remember that the cow's requirements for protein and energy are going to stay the same, or in some cases maybe even increase. We've got to have enough protein and energy going into those cows for continued lactation, so that they, if they're young cows, they can continue to grow, and if we need to, in some cases, we may need to increase body condition before those cows go into the winter months. That brings about a concept of supplementation when we've got a lot of standing forage that's available that I think producers want to remember. It's a concept that I call positive associative effect. And what that boils down to is that as these plants get lower in protein, then the bugs and the rumen can't utilize that forage nearly as well, nearly as fast, and those cows don't get the nutrients that they need. But if we can supply a small amount of a high protein supplement, say something like cottonseed meal, then we can help those bugs do a better job of digesting this forage. Take a look at this research that was done here at Oklahoma State University a number of years ago. And what we're looking at is a comparison of cows that either did not receive the protein supplement but were consuming low quality forage, or cows that got 1 3/4 pounds per head per day of cottonseed meal. First of all, the rumen retention time. That's the time that the forage was in the rumen before it got digested, passed out, and the cow had the empty feeling in order to want to go out and consume more forage. The retention time with those that got supplemented was shortened by about 32%. This then went ahead and correlated with intake. The cows that got a little bit of supplement, even though they're actually getting a little bit more feed being hand-fed to them, they consumed 27% more grass than did the cows that didn't get any supplement. So you've got a situation where they're consuming more forage, they're getting more out of it because we can tell that by the rumen retention time, and therefore those cows are getting more nutrients for milk production and for maintaining or increasing body condition. As we go into late summer, I'd suggest that if you've got lots of good grass available, take a look at your cows. If they're in great body condition already, especially mature cows, then we just continue the program as normal. But if we've got some younger cows, some 2-year-olds, some 3-year-olds that we think are just a little bit too thin, take advantage of that positive associative effect. Supply them with a small amount of a high protein supplement, and it'll help them digest more of this forage to better utilization, and they'll go into the winter in better body condition and do a better job for you in terms of delivering the calf next spring and rebreeding the following breeding season. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Last time I talked with Kim Anderson, he said that we reached the bottom of the wheat market, and Kim, that was back when wheat was above $3. There's parts of the state that it's actually creeping below?
Yeah, we're below $3 right now in most of the state. My price floor on the Kansas City futures contracts was $4.30. We've down around $4.10. The July contract got below $4, so I missed that just a little bit. Now we did talk about the basis getting up to over $1, and it is there, so we're right on that. Cash prices, you'll remember my floor on cash prices were $3. Mm-hmm. The floor on the futures was $4.30. I've missed. Well, I'm at one floor now, and I missed the other one. Our problem is it's a supply problem. We don't have a demand problem. We got a supply problem. 7 out of the last 9 years, we've had record world wheat production. But also 7 of the last 9 years, we've had record world wheat consumption. The only problem is the average per year of production over consumption is 530 million bushels. That's a total of 4.8 billion bushels excess production over the last 9 years. We don't have a demand problem. We've got a supply problem right now.
And in years past, you talked about how there's a correlation between the price of wheat and the price of corn.
Yeah, corn and wheat are married sometimes and they're divorced sometime, and right now they're married. Seems what we got excess wheat, and actually wheat right now I think is keeping corn prices down. We've seen corn prices fall off $1 over the last month. A lot of this is the wheat going into the feed market in replace of corn, and it's relatively good weather for corn production, which again is another supply problem.
Now, will we see any improvement in the wheat price?
Well, what it's going to take is reduction in supply. I've just written an article that says that we've got to keep these low prices at least to the November-December time period, because what we've got to do, what the market's got to do, is reduce the number of planted acres. So we got to have less planted acres. The big major factor on the supply problem is weather. Weather determines production. We've had great weather around the world, and we've had excess production around the world. Of course, corn is important. If we lost the corn crop, we'd get a small increase in prices. And everybody talks about the dollar value, and it does have a small impact, but it's pretty insignificant.
Should Oklahoma producers plant wheat next year?
Yes, you're either a wheat producer or not. I probably would not plant wheat on marginal acres, but my good acres, I'd plant wheat. But I'd make sure that I had protein and I had a good milling quality product, or I wouldn't raise it.
Okay, Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Gary McManus. Al Sutherland is off this week. That means you're stuck with lots of drought talk, my least favorite but most popular subject. So let's get right into the latest drought monitor map and see what we have going on in Oklahoma as far as drought goes. Well, with the recent rains, we have had some relief. We got rid of a bit of that moderate drought that's up in across the northern half of the state, but we still see that area of moderate drought in central Oklahoma, surrounded by some abnormally dry conditions. And up around Tulsa, we have some of that moderate drought remaining. So we have had relief in that area to a degree. Still some dry areas that haven't overcome those long-term deficits, but we have a growing area of concern with more flash drought developing across far southeastern Oklahoma, where, as you can see, there is now moderate drought across that area with the surrounding area of abnormally dry conditions, meaning that flash drought is starting to spread up to the north and to the west. So that's our area of concern. Now you might wonder why we have this area of concern down there with all the rain we've had. Well, they haven't had it down there across southeastern Oklahoma. If you look at the observed rainfall map from the Mesonet for the last 30 days, you can see that southeastern corner of the state has had less than an inch of rainfall over that time frame. And with this heat that we've been having over the last week and even all the way back into June, that's the prime ingredient that we need for the development of flash drought, in addition to the lack of moisture. And you can see from the percentage of normal rainfall map from that same time frame that much of that area is at less than 20% of normal rainfall for that period. And you can also see, like that area up around Tulsa and in central Oklahoma, they're still below normal, even with the rains over the last 30 days. So those are the areas of concern. Now, why do we still have those areas of moderate and abnormally dry conditions up across the northern parts of the state? Well, if we look at the last 90 days, so this goes all the way back to April 21st, we can still see those areas of lesser rainfall amounts from west central up into central, centered in Canadian County, and then up into northeastern Oklahoma, and that spot down there in southeastern Oklahoma. And again, a look at the percentage of normal rainfall map for that same time frame since April 21st, you see that central Oklahoma is the worst area at less than 60% of normal for that time frame. And again, that's going from not only flash drought, that's going into a normal, regular drought type situation when it goes on for that long period of time. So we have growing concerns. The heat dome's over us. We've lacked a little bit of rainfall in some areas of the state. Really what we need is a good northwesterly flow, some thunderstorms coming down, raining in those particular areas that have missed out, and hopefully we can end this drought before we get to dangerous territory in the fall season. So that's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Finally today, we've heard about blue-green algae in the news recently. So we wanted to take a few minutes to track down some experts to help us understand the science behind the bloom.
It's normal in ponds to have a phytoplankton bloom, that is microscopic algae that's distributed throughout the water column. What we begin to be a little bit concerned about is when we see a scum form, as some of those cells rise to the surface. The appearances really can be quite varied, but anytime you see a scum on the surface or just below the surface, that is something that you might think about.
The ones in fresh water that tend to be most problematic are called cyanobacteria. So technically they're not even algae, but we don't know what else to treat them as, so we pretend they're algae for purposes of studying them. And ecologically they function like algae. So these are true bacteria, but they're photosynthetic. They produce oxygen, they consume carbon dioxide, and they love phosphorus. And some of these are able to take nitrogen gas out of the atmosphere, so they don't necessarily need nitrogen fertilizer but because a lot of the fertilizer we use on lawns and farm fields is phosphorus, and also livestock waste contains a lot of phosphorus, that's leading to massive growth of cyanobacteria in freshwaters. Algae, like most organisms, don't like winter. They like it warm, and cyanobacteria in particular, among all the algae, like it particularly warm and even hot, and they especially like stagnant conditions. So under hot summer conditions, lakes will stratify and have warm water on the top and cold water on the bottom, and that allows the cyanobacteria to float at the surface and absorb all the sunlight and block the light from organisms below, and that's how they come to dominate the community. Normally, a lake or a stream would have a lot of different kinds of algae in it, but the cyanobacteria are particularly good under these warm, stagnant conditions with a lot of fertilizer in the water.
In a few cases, there are species of algae that are toxic. And if the biggest danger here is to pets or livestock. If they drink from an area where the algal scum has accumulated and it happens to be a toxic species of algae, then mortalities are possible and do happen. I wouldn't panic, but in general, anything you can do to discourage pets and livestock from drinking in those downwind areas where the scum accumulates would be beneficial. If you are seriously concerned and you can't keep livestock away from it without a lot of trouble, you might want to get a sample of the water tested.
There are various toxins that you can put in the water that will kill algae. The problem is you haven't fixed the problem, you've just killed it temporarily, and as soon as that poison wears off, the algae will come back again. Maybe worse than before, because they're just going to die and release all their fertilizer into the water, and then the cycle starts again.
Just keep your eyes open. There are many things that can go wrong in a livestock operation or when you're protecting your pets. This is not high on the list, but it's a very dramatic situation. The general advice you've probably heard before is, if in doubt, fence them out, and that's good advice until you can get some other inputs.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu. And also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone. And remember, Oklahoma Ag starts at sunup.